Good morning. My name is Blanca Beato and I'm the microclimate team leader of Bistria Test. Welcome to this webinar on indoor environmental quality. This is the first of a series of webinars on indoor environmental quality and will introduce the concept, whereas the future webinars will talk about each component of indoor environmental quality specifically. We're going to start with a brief introduction to well-being, and we're going to continue with how buildings can affect our well-being from an engineering point of view, and we're going to describe the 5 main components of indoor environmental quality, and finally we will sum up this presentation. So the first item on the agenda is what is well-being? Well, there is no consensus on the definition of well-being, but at least well-being has to include the presence of positive emotions, the absence of negative ones, then having satisfaction with life, being fulfilled, and have a positive functioning. So well-being can be classified in 4 main aspects. So we have physical well-being, which consists on having physical health, and being engaged in physical activities. Then we have to have mental well-being, which includes psychological and emotional well-being, social well-being, which would include life satisfaction and the fact that we participate in engaging activities, and work well-being. So we have to have some economic well-being, and we have to be satisfied at work, we have to develop, and we have to engage with our work. On the other hand, we have here some costs associated with employees' mental health problems, which are quite significant for businesses. According to the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, these costs are associated with loss in productivity because of sickness, early retirement, increased staff turnover, recruitment, and training. But also, productivity can be reduced through presenteeism, which is when we go to work, but we have a lower level of performance because we are stressed or experiencing mental health problems. And if we identify these costs early, we could be saving approximately 30%. Well, the next item on the agenda is how buildings can affect our well-being. So building wellness can be categorized in 3 groups, which are functional, psychological, and physical. In the functional group, we have things like facilities, furniture, space, layout. In the psychological group, we would have things like being able to control the temperature, having a nice view, having some greenery. And in the physical group, we have what we call indoor environmental quality. So indoor environmental quality can be easily measured, and if we exclude the quality of water, which obviously is very important for our well-being, the main 5 components that a building, that indoor environmental quality has would be noise, light, odors, thermal comfort, and indoor air quality. So let's start with noise. My colleague Rebecca Hawk, who is our acoustic expert, will give a detailed presentation on sound next week, but very briefly, sound is any pressure variation that the human ear can detect, and noise is any sound that is unwanted. So obviously, if we're exposed to high levels of noise at work, we could face hearing loss, multitasking becomes more difficult, we get stressed, and our motivation will plummet. And the World Health Organization has reported the cost of hearing loss in Europe at approximately £30 billion. But when we are in an office environment, it is very unlikely that we're going to be exposed to really high levels of noise. So what matters in an office environment is the fact that our conversations and our speech can be heard. So we can become up to 66% less productive just because we're distracted by our colleagues. Of course, nowadays we could talk about being distracted by slightly different colleagues and how it affects our productivity. So there is a relatively new standard that is used to calculate two different acoustic parameters, which are the privacy distance and the distraction distance. The privacy distance is the distance from a source at which speech is no longer intelligible, and the distraction distance is the distance where speech is only partly intelligible but mostly contributes to the background noise. Well, the next item on indoor environmental quality is light. When we measure light, we measure lux, which is the luminous flux per surface area. And we do not always need the same amount of light. It really depends on the task that we're doing. So, for example, the amount of light that we would need in a loading bay is between 100 and 150 lux. And the light that we would need if we were assembling a watch would be between 1,500 lux to 2,000 lux. If we have low levels of light, we would have eye strain, migraines, headaches, or irritability, and all of these will lead to poor concentration. So it's important to have the right levels, the right lux levels in space, but other factors are also important for our well-being, such as reduced glare, the fact that we have natural light or visual stimuli. We can also use the environmental light to match our circadian cycle. For example, blue lights can make us more alert, and dimmer lights can make us more creative or rested in the afternoon, ready to sleep and for the following day. The next component that I'm going to talk about is odors. Odors are very closely linked to indoor air quality. And there is a way of measuring odors. So Professor Ole Fanger from the University of Denmark actually has worked a lot on thermal comfort and on odors, and came up with a new unit of measure, the OLF, which is the rate at which a human emits air pollutants. But this human has to have had 0.7 baths, wear deodorant but not perfume, and also be comfortable with the environment. Odors are related to indoor air quality, and the way to deal with odors is to do a proper odor investigation if necessary, but it's also to have the right ventilation, as ventilation dilutes contaminants. You need to have the right levels of fresh air per person so that a room does not feel stuffy, and you also have to reduce the sources of emissions. And we will talk more about odors and indoor air quality in the indoor air quality webinar on Wednesday if you would like more information. The next indoor environmental quality component is thermal comfort. So thermal comfort is defined as that condition of mind that expresses satisfaction with the thermal environment. There are several standards to measure thermal comfort based also on the work from Professor Ole Fanger. For example, ASHRAE 55 or BSEN ISO 7730. ISO 7726 refers to the instrumentation needed for measuring. So thermal comfort is a little bit more than measuring the temperature and relative humidity. You also have to have the airspeed, the turbulence intensity, the black globe or the operative temperature, and the calculations on thermal comfort also take into account the level of activity and the clothing levels. So the thermal comfort results are three. They are draft risk, the predicted mean vote, and the predicted percentage of dissatisfied. Draft risk is the risk of a person feeling a draft. And well, the predicted mean vote is if I ask everybody in a room to vote how they feel with the environment, and to let me know on a scale from -3 to +3 how they feel with the environment, where 0 would be I feel quite comfortable in this environment, 1 would be I feel slightly warm, 2 I feel quite warm, 3 I feel extremely hot in this environment, and then -1, -2, and -3 would be I feel slightly cold, quite cold, and extremely cold in this environment. So if we put all those votes together, we would have the mean vote. The advantage of these calculations is that they can be done before a building is built. So for example, in a mock-up environment, and you can do several tests to decide what the right temperature would be or what the right type of ventilation would be to make the PMV as close to 0 as possible. And on the y-axis, we can see another thermal comfort parameter, which is the predicted percentage of the satisfied, or PPV. PPV is related to the PMV. So as you can see here, in an environment that is extremely hot or in an environment that is extremely cold, 100% of the people would feel dissatisfied with the environment. And the percentage of dissatisfied goes down as the PMV approaches 0. But if you see here, the PPV is never 0. There is always approximately 6% of people who would vote that they feel uncomfortable with the environment, even in the perfect environment. And finally, the last component of indoor environmental quality is indoor air quality. So good indoor air quality is defined as air with no non-contaminants at harmful concentrations. So this means that the air that we breathe is not contaminant-free, but we have to make it so that the level of contaminant is not harmful to our health. To have good indoor air quality, what we need is a few things. We need low external pollution concentrations or filtering in the ventilation system, because the air from outside is coming through the ventilation system or even through open windows. We also need low pollutant emissions from the internal sources, for example, materials such as paints or glues or new carpets or new furniture. And finally, we have to have a good level of ventilation because it can remove and dilute the contaminant concentration. The 5 main contaminants that affect air quality can be classified in particles, gases, odors, again, as I mentioned, that they were very closely related to air quality, volatile organic compounds, and biological, for example, bacteria, fungi, mold. On Wednesday, as I mentioned, there is another free webinar in which we're going to talk about indoor air quality in more depth. We're going to see what the main contaminants in the building might be, their effect on health, how to measure them, and what we can do in a building to improve indoor air quality. So you're very welcome to join us. So we have seen the 5 main components of indoor environmental quality. And to sum up this presentation, we have seen how well-being is made up of 4 elements, which includes social, mental, physical, and work well-being. We have seen how buildings can affect our well-being, and that the 5 main components of indoor environmental quality are indoor air quality, odors, noise, light, and thermal comfort. And we have seen how improving indoor environmental quality can bring benefits not only to the health of employees, but also to their productivity. And finally, if you would like more information on the topics that we have talked about today, there are another 3 webinars on indoor air quality, thermal comfort, and sound in the built environment, which are also free to attend. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for attending, and if you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer them. Thank you.